The cashier called me by my full name when I swiped my card, and that didn't add up because my name doesn't appear anywhere on the truck, neither on the uniform nor on the company card. While he was handing me the receipt, he commented that I was almost home, and at that moment I realized that the truck's GPS still showed more than 600 miles to the final destination. I left the gas station trying to ignore it, but before I got into the cab, the same guy said my daughter should be awake because it was past midnight in her time zone. I stopped with my hand on the truck door. I never mentioned my family on the road, and at that gas station in Texas, nobody had any reason to know I had a daughter, much less which state she lived in. When I turned on the dashboard and the fleet system opened the automatic route, a strange message appeared saying there was a recent destination adjustment. This never happens without authorization from headquarters. The address that appeared on the screen was not the cargo depot. That was my home address. I was driving a simple load of industrial parts from Laredo, Texas to a logistics center near Memphis. Nothing sensitive, nothing that required an escort or special route. It was one of those quiet freight runs that usually just involve hours on the road and bad coffee at gas stations open all night. The shipment had been cleared, the seal checked in the yard, and there were no comments from the company about any risk or targeted cargo. The night was clear, typical of South Texas, with that distant glow of cities reflecting low on the highway horizon. Traffic on the interstate was moderate, a few spaced-out trucks and passenger cars speeding by. I had stopped at that 24-hour service station more out of operational habit than real necessity. Check the tires, stretch my legs, grab coffee, and continue for a few more hours before my next scheduled stop. The company uses a standard telemetry system in the truck. It shows the route, recommended stop, and any adjustments sent by headquarters. Nothing too sophisticated, but sufficient to monitor position and estimated time of arrival. In years of operation, this system only changes destination when the company's logistics alter the delivery. And even then, a clear notification appears stating that the change came from headquarters. On that screen, however, there was no indication of the reason for the change, just the dry phrase "destination updated" and a residential address I knew all too well, my own house in Tennessee. That made no sense within the company's system. No freight forwarder would change a shipment's destination to a residential address in the middle of the night. I stared at it on the screen for a few seconds before leaving the gas station. The strange thing wasn't just the address appearing there. The system also showed the estimated time of arrival slowly decreasing, as if that address was actually becoming the final destination of the trip. Before putting the truck back on the road, I stood there for a few seconds looking at the dashboard. The GPS cursor kept blinking over that residential address as if it were a normal cargo delivery. There was no message from headquarters, no change code coming from dispatch. Just that strange destination and the estimated time of arrival scrolling slowly in the corner of the screen. I grabbed my phone to check the company app, thinking maybe the change had come from there. The system showed the original route from Texas to the Memphis depot, exactly as it should be. No recent updates, no messages from the dispatcher, no route change alerts. It was as if only the truck was seeing something different. That's when I noticed a small detail in the corner of the GPS screen. The system registered that the destination adjustment had been made from an external terminal connected to the fleet's network. That was strange enough, because the company's authorized terminals are all within its own internal system. An external terminal would only appear there if someone had administrative access or was using a port that shouldn't exist. I started the engine and left the gas station, trying to keep a cool head. As the truck returned to the highway, the GPS map began recalculating routes as if it were trying to find different paths to that address in Tennessee. This was incorrect behavior for a system that should only follow the programmed route of the cargo. That's when another detail appeared on the panel. Right below my home address, an automatic system notification appeared saying, "Scheduled stop confirmed." I had never scheduled any stop at that location, and at that moment I realized that someone wasn't just looking at my route. Someone was trying to control it. I continued driving along the highway, trying to ignore the dashboard for a few minutes, but it started to bother me more than it should have. The system kept recalculating the route from time to time, as if it were insisting on adapting the trip to that residential address. Even while following the correct interstate, the map always pulled the blue line back to the same destination. I decided to turn off the navigation module to see if that would stop it. The dashboard only showed the truck's basic data: speed, air pressure, and engine temperature. For a few kilometers, everything seemed normal again, just a dark road and distant lights in the rearview mirror. But about 15 minutes later, the system restarted itself. When the screen returned, the address was still there. This time there was a new detail right below the coordinates. The system indicated that the stop confirmation had been sent from a terminal located in the state of Texas itself. This made no sense at all because the company's headquarters that controls the routes is in a completely different state. That's when I started remembering the quick conversation at the gas station checkout. The man had said my full name, mentioned my daughter, and even said I was almost home. It had seemed strange just a few minutes earlier, but now it was starting to fit together in a way that was all too wrong. A few kilometers later, I noticed another detail in the side mirror. A dark car had been on the highway ever since I left the gas station. It wasn't tailgating, but it wasn't overtaking either. It always kept the same distance, as if it were leisurely following the journey. I kept watching the dark car in my mirror as it maintained a steady speed on the highway. It wasn't trying to overtake, nor was it letting the distance between them get too big. On an open road, that's strange enough, because normally cars pass trucks quickly. That one just stayed there, as if it were calculating the exact same speed. A few minutes later, the truck system issued another short warning on the dashboard. The same scheduled stop confirmed message appeared again, but this time accompanied by an estimated time. The strange detail was that the time decreased slowly, as if the system were calculating the approach of another vehicle, not just the truck. I looked again in the side mirror and noticed that the car had closed the distance a little more. It still wasn't right behind me, but now I could see its silhouette better in the left lane. There were no high beams, no attempt to overtake, just that constant presence behind the trailer while the road remained empty. That's when another warning appeared on the truck's dashboard. The system registered that the external terminal was still connected to the fleet's network. This shouldn't happen while the truck is in motion, far from any company facilities. Someone was accessing the system in real time. A few seconds later, a new line appeared in the GPS log. The message simply said, "Nearby vehicle identified on the route." The problem was that the company's system has no function whatsoever to identify cars around the truck, and at that moment, there was exactly one car maintaining a constant distance behind me on the dark highway. I decided to exit the interstate at the first illuminated exit that appeared on the highway sign. It wasn't a planned stop, just a small gas station mostly used by local trucks. I slowed down in advance and pulled the truck toward the exit. In the rearview mirror, I saw the dark car making the same move a few seconds later. I pulled into the yard, keeping the truck close to the brightest lights. The station wasn't large, but it had some visible cameras and 2 trucks parked further back. I turned off the engine and sat in the cab, watching in the rearview mirror. The dark car stopped a few meters behind, still with its engine running. It was at that moment that the truck system beeped again. The external connection message disappeared from the screen and a session-ended message appeared. Soon after, my home address disappeared from the destination, and the GPS automatically returned to the cargo's original route towards Memphis. The car behind me remained stationary for about half a minute, before slowly reversing and exiting the parking lot without ever passing the cabin. No honking, no attempt to approach. It simply drove back onto the road as silently as it had appeared. A few minutes later, I called the company's support and requested a full fleet system check. They confirmed that there had been an unauthorized external connection to the truck while I was at that 24-hour rest stop in Texas. The log showed that someone had accessed personal data linked to the driver before attempting to change the trip's destination. In the following days, the company filed a formal report regarding access to the fleet system. The technical department confirmed that the external terminal used for the connection was not part of any authorized company equipment. It was some type of device that managed to access the network for a few minutes and access data that is normally restricted to the administrative sector. The log also showed something that made me even more uncomfortable. Before the destination change appeared on the dashboard, the system had consulted exactly 3 pieces of information linked to my driver profile: home address, emergency family contact, and recent route history. All of this happened just minutes before the stop at that gas station. The final report ended up being forwarded to the local Texas police because it involved illegal access to data and attempted manipulation of cargo routes. From what I was told later, the same terminal had appeared in 2 other truck records that passed through the same region that week. I still drive that stretch of highway a few times a year when the route calls for it. The gas station remains open all night with the same fuel pumps and the same white lights in the forecourt. But since that trip, I've never stopped there again. And I always check the destination on the GPS before even setting the truck in motion. If you're enjoying the story so far, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. It really helps the YouTube algorithm show these stories to more people. The dock supervisor looked at my shipping document, then at the computer screen, and remained silent for a few seconds. Finally, he asked why I was bringing a shipment that had already been registered as delivered 3 hours earlier at that same warehouse in Illinois. I thought it was some simple system error, a common thing in large logistics centers. But when he turned the monitor towards me, I saw that my trailer number, the seal, and even the weight of the cargo were exactly the same as what was on my document. The problem was that the record said the truck had already unloaded everything at the same gate where I was standing, but I still had the trailer sealed behind the cabin. I had left Indiana a few hours earlier with a load of automotive components destined for a large logistics center outside Chicago. It was a short route, a common one for trucks that travel between factories and warehouses midweek. The shipment had been dispatched without delay, and the company sent the digital documentation along with the physical copy that I always carry in my cab briefcase. I arrived at the complex near the end of the afternoon, when the docks are in constant motion with trucks coming and going without stopping. The place was large, full of aligned warehouses and numbered gates. A yard employee did the usual trailer check and directed my truck to the gate designated by their system. After I parked at the dock, I walked to the receiving office with the cargo paperwork. This procedure is always the same in urban warehouses. The driver hands over the document, the dock staff check it in the internal system, and then they authorize the opening of the trailer seal. It was at that exact moment that the supervisor began to find the situation strange. He typed in the shipment number, then checked the shipping code and asked for the document again to verify that there were no typing errors. Everything seemed too correct to be a simple system mistake. Before handing me back the paper, he commented on something that didn't seem to make sense at the time. According to the warehouse records, the truck that had unloaded that same cargo had not only used the same shipment number, but had also presented an identical document to mine. The supervisor asked me to wait a moment while he called someone from the administrative department to look at the situation more closely. I went back to the truck cab and watched the activity at the other docks. Trucks were coming in, others were leaving empty. Forklifts were crossing the yard carrying pallets. Everything seemed too normal for a situation where the system said my cargo had already been delivered. A few minutes later, he returned accompanied by a woman from the warehouse's main office. She brought a tablet with the previous delivery record open on the screen. The first thing that caught my attention was that the digital document really looked identical to mine. Same layout, same shipment number, same shipping company. She then asked me to show her the trailer's seal before they opened anything. We went down together to the back of the truck. The metal seal was still intact, exactly as it had been placed in the original yard. There was no sign of cutting, replacement, or any visible tampering. When we returned to the dock office, she expanded the record of the previous delivery in the system. That's when the first truly strange detail appeared. The digital document for that supposed delivery had been manually validated by an internal supervisor, something that normally only happens when there's a problem with the automatic code. She stared at the digital signature in the system for a few seconds before saying something that completely changed the atmosphere in the room. The supervisor who had authorized that delivery was not working that shift that day. The administrative assistant asked the supervisor to temporarily close the dock gate while they checked the records more carefully. I stood leaning against the office window watching the yard while they accessed other records in the system. Trucks continued to arrive normally, but inside that room the atmosphere had completely changed. She opened the complete shipment history and began checking each step of the digital documentation. The curious thing was that all the data seemed technically correct. Arrival time, weight recorded on the yard scale, and gate number used for unloading. Everything was recorded within the warehouse's normal standards. But there was one detail that didn't match the routine of that place. The record indicated that the gate had been manually released by the same supervisor who wasn't present that shift. Normally, these releases are done automatically by the system when the truck enters the yard and is directed by the gate control. She then opened the camera log associated with the gate that appeared on the document. Each dock in that warehouse had a simple system that saved an image when a truck pulled up to unload. The system loaded the photo of the supposed truck that had made the delivery. When the image appeared on the screen, the supervisor next to me stared silently for a few seconds. The truck in the photo had no visible logo from the transport company, and the trailer was positioned in a way that was far too strange for a normal unloading operation. The strangest thing was that the camera only showed part of the rear of the vehicle. The trailer number that should have appeared there was simply not visible in the image. The administrative assistant continued analyzing the camera image while the supervisor checked the dock records again. The truck in the photo was parked against the gate, but the positioning seemed incorrect for any normal unloading operation. The rear of the trailer appeared misaligned a few centimeters to the right, enough to prevent the forklifts from entering directly. Even so, the system recorded that the complete unloading of the cargo had been finished at that specific gate. She then opened the yard's weighbridge log, which automatically records the weight of all vehicles as they pass through the complex's main gate. The truck listed for the delivery had entered the warehouse with a weight virtually identical to the load I was bringing at that moment. Up to that point, it seemed like just a strange coincidence within the logistics system. The problem arose when she opened the exit log for the same truck in the gate system. The weight recorded at the exit showed practically the same value as the entry, with a difference too small to represent the removal of the entire load from the trailer. This meant that the truck that supposedly unloaded there left the yard still loaded. The supervisor stared at the numbers on the screen for a few seconds before asking to check another detail of the record. He opened the field showing who had manually authorized that operation within the warehouse system. The digital signature continued to appear under the name of a supervisor who wasn't even working that shift. It was at that moment that the woman from the administrative office said something that completely changed the interpretation of the situation. If that truck didn't unload anything and still received full authorization in the system, then the registration of that delivery wasn't just an administrative error. Someone had created that document to make it seem like the cargo had already passed through there. The dock gate was temporarily locked in the warehouse system while they checked the shipment status. No employee opened the trailer at that time. Standard procedure requires a full verification when any discrepancy appears between the physical document and the digital record. My truck remained parked at the dock with the seal intact, while the internal team began a more detailed check. Shortly after, 2 security personnel from the complex arrived with access to the complete yard log system. They began cross-referencing the times of the supposed delivery with the images from the main gate cameras. The truck registered in the system had indeed entered the warehouse at that specific time. What caught our attention was the length of time the vehicle remained in the yard. The record showed that the truck entered, passed through the weighbridge, and left again a few minutes later. Any driver who has ever unloaded at a logistics center knows that this time frame is impossible for a real unloading process. They then analyzed the camera footage from the dock area. None of the images showed a forklift entering the trailer or pallets being moved from the truck. The vehicle simply pulled up quickly to a gate and left the yard shortly afterward. Based on this information, the warehouse opened an internal report regarding possible document manipulation of the shipment. My shipment remained sealed while the logistics department communicated the case to the carrier and officially registered the incident in the company's system. The cargo was only unloaded after all internal checks were completed by the warehouse and the carrier. The trailer's seal was checked in the presence of security and the shift supervisor before the doors were opened. Everything was exactly as it had left the original yard, without any sign of tampering or previous movement of the cargo. After the unloading, they asked me to stay in the office for a few more minutes while they finalized the incident report. The logistics department wanted to record all the route details, stop times, and seal confirmation at the time of collection. This information became part of the administrative investigation opened by the logistics center itself. In the following days, The carrier reported that this type of duplicate registration had already appeared in other warehouses in the industrial region of Illinois. The pattern was always similar. A truck would quickly enter the yard, pull up to a dock for a few minutes, and leave without unloading anything. But the system would register a complete delivery of the shipment. The suspicion raised by the security sector itself was that someone was creating false delivery records to try to divert real cargo on subsequent routes. When the real truck arrived at its destination, the documentation already appeared as completed within the system. From that day on, I started checking the shipment record in the warehouse system before even pulling into any dock. Because discovering that your cargo has already been delivered while it's still behind your cab is not a situation any driver wants to face twice. The truck's headlights illuminated a car stopped across the middle of the rural road, occupying both lanes and making no attempt to move. There were no flashing emergency lights, no open doors, and no sign of anyone trying to call for help in that isolated stretch of Arizona. I instinctively slowed down while trying to figure out if it was a recent accident or just a lost driver trying to maneuver. That's when I realized the car was aligned in a very strange way, exactly where the road narrowed between two low earthen embankments. At that moment, it became clear that if I stopped completely there, the truck wouldn't have any room to get out of there quickly. I was crossing a secondary stretch of Arizona that connects two major highways used by trucks that avoid urban areas during the early morning hours. The cargo for that trip was simple: pallets of agricultural supplies destined for a warehouse near the New Mexico border. Nothing of high value, nothing that required an escorted route or special attention from the company. The road was one of those narrow rural tracks that cut through dry land for miles without streetlights. Just 2 lanes, a dirt shoulder, and a few sections with small lateral elevations in the ground. At night, it becomes a dark corridor where the only real reference points are the truck headlights and the reflective road signs. I had driven that stretch of road a few times over the years. It's not a busy place, but it's not completely deserted either. Every now and then you'll see a local truck transporting cattle, a farm vehicle, or even pickup trucks crossing between rural properties. That night, traffic was practically non-existent. For almost 40 minutes, I hadn't seen a single vehicle coming in the opposite direction. The CB radio was also quiet, with no one speaking on that channel. Only the constant sound of the engine and the noise of the tires on the asphalt. It was in exactly this setting that the car appeared, blocking the road a few seconds before I reached the low bend in the terrain. And the strange detail wasn't just the car stopped there. The reason was that there was absolutely no one visible inside or around it. I slowed the truck down while trying to gauge the safe distance to the car stuck across the rural road. The road narrowed at that point between 2 small embankments of dry earth, leaving little room for any lateral maneuver. Stopping completely there could mean getting stuck in that dark corridor with no chance to react quickly if something went wrong. The truck's headlights provided better illumination to the stopped pickup, revealing an older model with light-colored paint covered in desert dust. The vehicle was positioned at an odd angle, its front pointing to one side of the road and its rear blocking the other lane. It didn't look like a failed attempt to turn around. It looked like a deliberate position to prevent direct passage. I continued to slow down while observing every detail of the car and the road around me. The CB radio remained completely silent, with no other driver mentioning anything on that stretch of secondary highway. The atmosphere was too quiet, as is common in isolated parts of Arizona during the early morning hours. That's when I noticed a small detail I hadn't seen when I first approached the truck. The driver's side door of the pickup truck was slightly ajar, swaying gently in the dry desert wind. Even so, there was no one visible inside the vehicle or walking near the road. While I was still trying to decide whether to stop or try to go around by land, something appeared in the side reflection of the cabin mirror. A second faint light emerged from behind one of the low embankments beside the road, as if another vehicle were stopped off the pavement, waiting in that dark spot. I kept the truck at a very low speed while simultaneously observing the pickup truck blocking the road and the faint reflection that had appeared behind the embankment. The road at that point formed a narrow corridor between mounds of dry earth, making it impossible to see the surrounding terrain clearly. The headlights only illuminated what was directly ahead of the truck. The pickup truck remained parked in exactly the same position, with the driver's door slightly open and no visible movement inside the vehicle. The detail that was starting to bother me was the complete silence around the road. No engine noise, no radio playing inside the car. Absolutely nothing. I looked again in the side mirror, trying to locate that second faint light that had appeared a few seconds earlier. It didn't seem to be a direct vehicle headlight, more like a low reflection that appeared and disappeared behind the mound of earth beside the road. That indicated that something was stopped off the road. I continued to slowly approach the truck until I was at a distance where the headlights illuminated almost the entire side of the pickup. That's when I noticed that the truck's wheels were perfectly aligned, as if the driver had deliberately stopped there and turned off the vehicle immediately. At that moment, something changed too quickly to seem like a coincidence. The door of the pickup truck, which had been ajar, began to move slowly, opening a few more centimeters. But there was still no one visible in the driver's seat. I slowly pulled the truck closer until its headlights fully illuminated the side of the pickup truck, blocking the rural road. The vehicle remained stopped at the same awkward angle, occupying both lanes of that narrow stretch of asphalt. The driver's door was open a few centimeters wider now, swaying slowly in the dry desert wind. Even so, there was still no one visible inside the truck's cab or walking near the road. I kept the truck almost stationary while assessing the remaining distance to the obstacle. The road at that point offered no usable shoulder, only loose dirt and low embankments that could trap the trailer. Any attempt to swerve off the pavement could cause the vehicle to lose stability in that narrow corridor. Stopping completely would also mean getting stuck exactly where the road narrowed. That's when I noticed a quick movement near the back of the pickup truck. Something low briefly crossed the beam of the headlights before disappearing again into the darkness of the side road. It didn't look like an animal, and it didn't look like someone running directly across the road either. The movement was too fast and too close to the vehicle it was crossing. As I tried to understand what I had seen, I looked again in the side mirror of the cabin. The faint light that had previously appeared behind the embankment was no longer in the same dark spot on the road. Now it appeared a little higher and closer to the asphalt, as if a second vehicle were moving slowly along the side terrain. It was at that moment that the situation became too clear to ignore. The car blocking the road wasn't there by accident or mechanical failure. It was stopped exactly where the truck would have been forced to reduce its speed almost completely on that stretch of road. And at that moment, I realized that stopping there was probably exactly what someone was expecting me to do. I kept the truck moving very slowly while quickly calculating the only possible way out of that situation. Stopping behind the pickup truck would mean being completely exposed in that narrow stretch of rural road. Accelerating straight ahead wasn't an option either because the car was blocking both lanes of the asphalt. The only real alternative seemed to be trying to partially exit onto the dirt road before reaching the vehicle blocking the road. I started turning the steering wheel slightly to the right, trying to position the truck near the edge of the road. The dry ground beside the asphalt seemed firm enough to support the weight of the cab for a few meters. The biggest risk was the trailer losing alignment, but at that moment, stopping on the road seemed like a worse option. When the cab tires touched the ground, the truck swayed slightly due to the uneven terrain. I maintained a steady speed, trying to squeeze through the narrow space between the embankment and the back of the pickup. The beam of light from the headlights fully illuminated the side of the vehicle as I slowly passed by. It was at that moment that a man appeared quickly behind the pickup truck, running towards the side of the road. He didn't try to reach the truck or block its path. He simply emerged in the beam of light for a second and disappeared again into the darkness of the terrain. As soon as the trailer had completely passed the side vehicle, I turned the truck back onto the asphalt and accelerated enough to gain distance from that point on the road. In the side mirror, I could still see the pickup truck stopped in the same place, but now another light was appearing near it on the adjacent lot. I continued accelerating for several kilometers without slowing down, keeping my eyes alternating between the road and the side mirrors of the cab. For a good while, no vehicle appeared behind me on that dark stretch of rural road. The CB radio remained completely silent, with no other driver mentioning anything unusual on that route. After about 20 minutes, I found a small gas station used by local trucks that crossed that region during the early morning hours. I entered the yard with the engine still running and remained inside the cab for a few minutes, just observing the movement around me. There wasn't a single car resembling the pickup truck that had blocked the road. I quickly recounted what had happened to the gas station attendant while grabbing a coffee before heading back onto the road. He didn't seem surprised when I mentioned the pickup truck stuck across that rural stretch. He simply said that some truckers had reported similar situations in that region in recent months. According to him, the cars appear at points where the road narrows and force the trucks to slow down almost to a stop. Sometimes the people who are hiding try to approach the driver. Other times they just watch to see if the truck actually stops. Since that trip, I completely avoid that secondary route in Arizona, even though it saves a few miles on the journey. Because driving across a dark road and finding a car stopped blocking both lanes isn't something that seems improvised when you look closely. It seems like something someone has done many times before. Thank you for staying until the end. If you enjoy these types of human-based horror stories, make sure to subscribe to Beyond the Quiet and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your engagement, likes, subs, and comments is the only way YouTube knows this channel is worth recommending to others. Don't forget to tell me your location and the current time in the comments. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.